The one thing I do remember was being called upon at ungodly hours by Nelson and Deb Gissel to accompany them to record heat stroke patients for the mines. The mines were approaching the depths which pushed the temperature very high, and a lot of miners suffered from heat stroke in the early days. And there was a theory that doing EEGs on them would predict would be prognostic. But of course you had to drive out to Welkom and to fairly far-flung areas. So I was recruited to do this, with Dave usually, to do the donkey work really, attach electrodes and help with recording. Other things that I was involved in the early days was to record clinical EEGs. The NIPR had quite a busy clinical EEG section or service for doctors, usually neurologists, who didn't have their own recording facilities. So we recorded EEGs for, say, 50–60% of the neurologists in Joburg. There was a strong connection between the NIPR EEG section and the Princess Nursing Home and also the Johannesburg Hospital. Through this kind of work, we got into training EEG technicians because there was no other establishment which had any kind of training facility. This is recognized by the Medical and Dental Council for registration purposes. And we trained, in the early days, possibly 90% of the EEG technicians, and they came to us from all parts of the Republic. Basically, the course involved 3 weeks of lectures, then the impending EEG technician, or intending EEG technician, would go back to his or her practice, do recording, and then we would monitor them. They would post them to us. We would check for quality, and if after a year it looked reasonable, there would be a practical exam. There were research projects at that time, nothing really spectacular. I had my accident in 67. This was just after we had been down to the Cape and recorded EEGs from applicants for submarine service, the original Daphne cruise. Obviously, being a submariner, it would be undesirable to have epileptic seizures. And the idea was to try and exclude this type of person from submarine service. Because of various staff shortages in other divisions, I didn't do any EEG recording, but did interviewing of some of the candidates. Later on, after my accident, I obviously couldn't come down to the Cape. So I got into analysing EEGs and analysed most of the early submarine crews. And then it also got into the divers. Obviously a diver who has an epileptic seizure underwater is in great danger. The EEG is not a very good predictor, well, not 100% predictor of epilepsy, but it does give you an indication of possible seizure. The other military aspect that the division was involved with was the selection of pilots. And again, you don't want a pilot with epilepsy flying your aeroplane, especially if you're a passenger in the aeroplane. So the idea was to try and exclude people with suspicious EEG activity from applying for pilot jobs. I think probably that was quite a useful application of the EEG. I don't recall any people that we selected flying an aeroplane into the ground, possibly because of a seizure. The first project that I think, the first true neuropsychology project in South Africa was the study of the Knysna tree cutters, or lumberjacks, I suppose, because they underwent a range of tests, psychometric tests, tests of motor function, as well as EEGs. So later on, this became more and more fashionable, using tests to measure the effects of brain damage. And the NIPR was very much involved in the early days, and again right to the end.